Welcome to Modern Marketing Messages, the leading podcast discussing the latest and greatest in both online and offline marketing tactics, strategies, and trends. I'm your host, Taylor Karg, marketing content writer at AmericanEagle.com. Today, we're going to discuss the findings of an online disability community survey conducted by AmericanEagle.com accessibility experts. To do that, I have here with me Nick Goodrum, Director of Front-End Development and Accessibility, and Norbert Rum. Oh, wow, I just realized that rhymes.
Yep.
Nick Goodrum, Norbert Rum, here we go.
We totally chose it. You know, we totally chose this. It's
the original.
Like, he actually had a different last name. We made him change it as soon as he got hired. All employees inside the specialists team have to have some sort of, I guess, alcoholic last name.
I guess so.
But no, it was just random chance that we happen to have a very similar last name.
I love it. Well, and Norbert Rum, accessibility specialist, both AmericanEagle.com experts. Welcome, you guys. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So no, it's I've been on these, I guess, a couple of times now, but I get to incorporate some more folks from our department.
Yeah, this is exciting.
So yeah, the main thing is we've been doing a lot of work for our clients for quite some time, and it's just more that we've always had side projects that we've wanted to do, and so then Norb actually then jumped in and was like, hey, I've got a side project for us that we want to get into. So
awesome. I'm excited to learn all about it because when we were kind of meeting to discuss what we were going to talk about today, you sent me over a PowerPoint and I looked through that and I was like, wow, this is really cool and something that, I'm excited to know more about because I don't know much. Like all of our conversations, Nick always teaches me a lot. So before we get into it, can you guys just describe a little bit about your roles here at AmericanEagle.com, how long you've been here, a little bit about your responsibilities?
Yeah, in case people haven't heard before, and I'll go into my little spiel. I've been with the company over 13 years now, I think. It gets harder to measure after you get a certain amount of time.
Time flies when you're having fun, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I actually started out in the front end space when we didn't even call it front end. We had different names for it and whatnot. I slowly grew into being a leadership role and actually then was overseeing the front end development practice. One of those things is focusing on best practices. And you might guess what one of those best practices is, which is accessibility. And I became a major advocate. And then we pretty much shifted gears from being reactive to proactive with our clients. And we pretty much then needed to really grow out a whole entire team around that and been growing that for a few years now, which is there. We got one of the people.
Here we are, yeah. All right, Norb, your turn.
All right. I've been with American Eagle for about a year and 9 months. It's almost 2 years.
I feel like we might have started on the same day.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yep. Actually, we did start on the same day.
Because I remember meeting you and I was like, yes, another really tall person.
We're the rare.
Yeah.
But I've been in accessibility longer than just a year and 8 months. I actually worked for a large what's called Industries for the Blind, which is part of these programs. And I was an accessibility specialist, but on a different side. I was on the user end side rather than the website side.
Okay, gotcha.
And so I've been in the community itself for over a decade and a half, probably 15 years.
Wow.
So that was really like a great learning experience for me.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited. It seems like both of you really know what you're talking about. So this will be a fun conversation. So let's get some background on this survey. Can you guys explain what the survey is, how the idea came about, and how did it become an initiative that you guys wanted to pursue?
Yeah. So like I was kind of saying a little bit earlier where, we want to be able to, again, we learn a lot from communities from the outside space, and we want to be able to share that as well. So we also have side projects that we like to do on top of, again, helping all of our clients, but trying to also figure out how we better connect with communities and better educate. And that's where, Norb was kind of coming in and was like, hey, I've got some ideas.
Yeah. So, just so everybody knows on the podcast that's listening in, I created Reddit Blind, which is one of the largest, actually the largest blind communities out there. And it's not just for one single type of blindness where a lot of these communities are. It's all types of blindness. There's a spectrum. And some people have visual impairment that's on the low end, and some people have complete blindness and blind and deaf and all types. And I created it in 2010.
Wow.
And it started as a small little group and ended up being about 19,000 as of today. 19,000 members. And
wow, holy cow.
Yeah, and it has about around 32,000 active users a month, which is quite a bit. That means outside users to come to this Reddit blind community. And also, I also created what's called Discord Our Blind, which is the community for our Discord group, which has about 650 members now, and it's growing. And it's growing quite big that the Discord accessibility specialists are on our community, watching our community and responding and using our users' experience on helping better Discord.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to see that.
Yeah. So I've been able to connect a bit with Reddit itself. So there's been communication with them to actually say, hey, we want to better understand how we make the websites better. And the same thing with Discord. How do they make their applications better? So it's actually a way to also further communicate and connect with communities. I also really like how what Reddit Blind was originally, which was...
oh, yeah. So when how do I explain this? When I first came across Our Blind, it was not for blind users. It was actually window blinds. And there's a lot of Windows blinds on the page.
I'm sure that was a really interesting thread.
The subreddit alone, there's so many, or maybe no real activity whatsoever.
And I'm like, okay, this has to go. And so there is a user above me that had it. And I said, listen, I'm going to take over this. Just give me that full access and I will redo this whole entire group, make it accessible, and provide the users I know from my experience to this group and grow it out. And that's what I did. And it's, like I said, slow pace, but it grew to a very big community that everybody in the industry, in the accessibility industry, but also outside user base knows of and uses to communicate. One reason why I created that community is I like influencers, but I like having everybody else be an influencer and have their own megaphone. And so I wanted every user to have their own megaphone in the community. So if you look through the Reddit blind messages and the threads, you could see people asking their own questions and having answers from not just one person or two, but 20. And it's really good to help provide that information to especially young users. Because there's a lot of young users that are on there that are going through something and need help. There's also users that are coming in most recently, probably like a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, that had an accident of some sort. They lost vision. They don't know where to go. Yes, there is educational facilities like lighthouses and so forth, but they also want to communicate with people their own age or people that are going through it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that it grew from that as well.
That's so cool. Wow.
So one of the surveys so getting into the survey aspect, right?
Yeah.
And so
I forgot this is where we were going with this.
Sorry. No. I mean, it's good to get the background and the context because I think a lot of people aren't aware that there are these communities. And I think a lot of organizations, it's a bit of out of sight, out of mind, where it's like not awareness that you can actually, figure out some of these experiences from end users. So there's some surveys out there, like WebAIM does a survey, a bunch of different places do, but WebAIM is fairly well recognized as an organization that's doing this. And so they've been doing this for many years, where they actually have a couple different surveys, one specifically focused for like screen reader use surveys, things like that. And so, when I was talking with Norb about, and he's, again, tapping into the communities, hearing the feedback. And a lot of people are saying was like, well, that doesn't really feel like the results were representing us. Like you're talking
about the results of WebAIM Survey. They were seeing this and reading it and saying this doesn't feel.
So a lot of times WebAIM comes out every year or two. It changes. But when the data comes out, I post it on the board, and all of a sudden the responses are, hey, I cannot believe there's so many users that are using this type of assistive technology like JAWS. And they're using NVDA, or they're using Android and not iOS and iPhones. The mixture wasn't, they didn't connect.
Something wasn't adding up correctly.
It wasn't as broad as in their opinion, right? So again, it is this kind of, individuals, right? Everyone's an individual. So to a degree, you might go like, oh, okay, well, from my perspective, it doesn't seem like that really aligns with what I see within my communities, right? Like, so it'd be, or, again, from their perspective where, okay, from the community, the small groups that they're in, they're like, none of us use this particular one. Why is that somehow, number one and the biggest thing, right?
Uh-huh.
So, we actually then kind of reached out and actually said, hey, well, why don't we do a survey that's then focused on you, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, again, it's all surveys are going to have some level of bias because it's who responds, right?
Yeah.
And sample size, right? And where all you can get that information from. And so it's not to say WebAIM wasn't a good survey. It still has a lot of great data and information, but where are they going for their information? Who are they reaching out to, right? Where are the communities that are getting that? And so maybe some of the people in the online communities, maybe there's a bit more international aspects. Maybe there's people that are a bit more of like, okay, well, I'm more of an online, and I self-taught rather than going through maybe more through like the medical
the tinkerers,
path, right? And so there's going to be the tinkerers that are like, oh, I like this, right? So even surveys from others have kind of shown like, oh, a lot of the online communities tend to be, as Norm just noted, right, is the tinkerers, right? The people that like to mess with stuff. So their opinion of what is normal could be different than someone that's not as technically savvy and might be just, okay, I just need what I need to get done and might be only trained in particular ways. So we were going, okay, well, let's open up the sample data then, right? Okay, let's reach out to the online communities. And so we started working on this, right? And then we actually...
So I reached out to the mods in my group. I have great mods that are visually impaired, either fully impaired or have some type of impairment. And I asked them, hey, would you be okay with putting a survey together? And I got their blessing to start putting some ideas out there. I also reached out to other groups, cerebral palsy group, the disability. There's a subreddit called Disability. There's a subreddit for different types of groups that are out there. Ours is technically the biggest for one individual type of issue or
type of disability
type of disability or user base. But the other groups are also fairly big. Autism, for example, is a very, very big group. And I asked them if it was okay, would they participate, and they said absolutely. They would love to have more data because everybody likes data, because data will help reach it helps provide a new technology idea for the future. And that's perfect for this.
And so initially it was, okay, well, it's going to be around screen readers, but then we were like, well, why limit ourselves, right? And so it is this, okay, well, instead of just thinking of a particular input device, right? So screen readers would be, again, something that's going to announce it or go output in Braille for people with low vision, or with sometimes if you have cognitive disorders, things like that. And it's like, well, there's many different ways people are accessing the web. So why don't we just make it more about tool focus and the experience of those users using those tools? Part of the things that we're aiming to figure out is, okay, well, the typical assumption is, okay, maybe you're only using one tool, right? Maybe you're only using a screen reader, or you're only using a magnification tool. But there could be users that are actually using many different combinations. And so the assumption that it's like, oh, we only need to account for keyboard for screen reader users, or we only need to account for mouse for magnification users, or things like that, where it's like, well, that's a strong assumption when there could be all types. So we figured broadening out and allowing for different types of disabilities and again, user feedback as a whole, we can get a better sense of just how people are using the web. We also communicated, so it's not just rogue, right? We've actually been working with people from WebAIM as well. And so
cool.
It got their blessing as well. It's like, hey, we're not trying to really compete with you. We're just trying to say like, hey, there's more people saying, hey, we want our voice. And okay, well, let's group that together. And on their side, they go, oh, okay, great. Actually, if anything, it either reestablishes what we have, right? So it goes, look, the data's the same. You can't really disregard it anymore. The data's the same. Or if it is different, okay, then how are we needing to incorporate more demographics?
And adding a little more sprinkle of information that might be important to add to a survey. And WebAIM, Jared was really excited about it. And he gave us the full blessing.
And I think that says something about the community as a whole for the accessibility space, is that, some places there are, and again, every organization, every type of industry has a bit of gatekeeping or whatnot, but there's a lot more openness to kind of working together rather than saying like, this is our secret information that no one, and it's like, no, we're trying to improve the experience for end users. So let's work together and figure out how we can make that happen.
Yeah, gotcha.
Future-proof it.
Yeah. So let's get into a little bit about what the types of questions were actually on the survey. So where did you guys start? What was the process like?
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. So because we have to play a balance game, right? There's a lot of information that we would like to gather, but we also have to not make it 2 hours long.
Because people are not going to take a 2 hour
and
long.
Even the balance is tough because we're trying to incorporate so many different type of input types. So really, it kind of breaks down into general demographics, right? Where you're located, age, aspects like that. What do you use to access the web? If you're using a desktop, a mobile device, or both. There's a lot of multiple choice options. So, for example, even disabilities. It's not a radio option. It's not saying, okay, one or the other. It's like you could have multiple, right?
Yep.
And so the same thing. It's like you're not just assuming you're only going to use one screen reader in your lifetime. So, okay, well, what have you used? But then we do have more pointed ones that are kind of saying, okay, well, what's your primary one? What's the one that you use the most? So we have those types of questions to help reduce for users that don't use every type of input. It's all sections start with a yes, no of like, do you use this? Are you aware of this? Is this something you interact with? And if they say no, you skip, 5, 6 questions that are specifically for it, and you go on to the next section. So we tried to reduce that. But yeah, I mean, I think our average
was quite high still.
So it's like 20 minutes or something like that. So it's still lengthy.
That's not a good line.
So versus some surveys that can be quick and be done in 5 minutes, this is still lengthy just because it's hard, right? Because you don't want to limit it down. And so that's why some surveys just say, okay, let's just only focus on screen readers. But you like to get the bigger concept of users are probably using more than one way of interacting with the web. You still have to have that broader aspect. So it's a balance game. We can, we did a lot of whittling down and trying to find that balance. And we'll continue to work on that.
It's a learning. It definitely was a learning experience.
Yeah. Well, and again, you get feedback. So, and again, it's also figuring out what tools, right? And this is every single person trying to do anything on the web. They're like, okay, well, I have all these list of things that I need for features. And then you go, and one of those things absolutely has to be accessibility. Right?
Yeah.
And you go, okay, well, there's a lot of tools out there that do surveys. Not all of them are accessible. So then, okay, well, then what do you do about that? Right. And then, so we actually were so we used a type form for ours, and there was some limitations, but we actually were able to work around them and get feedback from the community, and actually had people test through it and ourselves as well to kind of say, okay, where are the pain points? And it's the least amount of pain points, right?
Yeah.
And okay, we can work around some of these limitations. And then access as a whole, right? That it's, we have international respondents, but we may not have as many because it's still in English form and it wasn't translated in every single language, right? Yeah. So there is kind of that question in future iterations of, okay, how do we incorporate more? We've been in communication with some that are actually from the community. They're like, hey, maybe we can translate or something.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of different demographics. Right now, I think we're around 350 people have submitted so far.
Oh, I was going to ask, how many submissions have you had so far?
Yeah.
And so if you said around 350, how many are you guys, aiming to get to so that you can draw like a real legitimate, conclusion about this?
Yeah. And so the ideal, minimum we were going for is probably at least 1,000 to 2,000, right? If we get more, great. The more data, the better.
Yeah.
So, because right now, I mean, even some of our responses, right, a majority are from North America or Europe, right? So those are the two biggest respondents so far. And then the next one would be like Asia and Oceania, and then, but like Middle East, Central America, South America, they tend to be less submissions.
Yeah.
And so if you have only a few submissions from those locations, if you only have 1 or 2 submissions, it's kind of going, well, really all you can gather from that particular location is anecdotal, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that user's experience in their location. But you can still extrapolate more global aspects of, okay, how do they interact with the web? And what are the ways people are actually doing that? So that's where you still want enough of a population sample that is still helpful. Is that as much as the people with disabilities? No, not whatsoever, right? Yeah. But that's where it gets into, and, we can dive into a bit later and whatnot, but there's a common concern of, survey fatigue, right? And it's okay, well, how many people really want to fill out a survey and what are the gains from it? And so that's something, any organization that's trying to do surveys, you're still going to have to play that balance game.
And that survey fatigue is a real deal, especially in the blind community. A lot of people are not aware of this, but a lot of communities in the disability communities have abundance of surveys. Some added.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
So,
like like universities. You get a bunch from universities, a bunch of PhD students or whatnot, trying to be like, here, I need a survey for this, and I need
in order to get my PhD. And the problem with that is there's so many that, especially my community, that read last year it was probably like 20 a month, 30 a month from different universities across the country, or actually across the world, because we had Oxford and University of Munich. When they post these surveys and they ask for all these types of questions, the user base gets upset because it's so much they're asking.
Like no one wants to be bombarded 20 to 30 times a month with a survey, almost essentially maybe answering the same kind of questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
a lot of times it is.
Yeah, and I completely understand.
So the reason I had to ask my community if it was okay was due to the fact that I'm asking the same thing. A lot of these surveys.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure that was.
Yeah. So no, it's very much just kind of like, okay, you wanted a voice and you feel like some of these aren't really grouping that all together. Okay, we'll try this out. All right. And then see what that response is. But yeah, as you might guess, you're still not going to get, even though you've got tens of thousands of users across all these different organizations and different communities, they're going to be like, yeah, I already did like 5 this month. And I'm still kind of burnt out from it. So that's why we're keeping it going for around 6 months or so.
I was going to ask, how much more time are you guys going to keep this? So how long has it been open?
So it's been about 2.5 months.
2.5 months.
Which is great for 2.5 months.
Yeah. Oh,
The number's pretty
so
growing.
We seem to be on track, but that's where we'll kind of feel it out towards the tail end to kind of go like, are we getting enough data from everywhere? But we're getting positive responses so far from people actually submitting it, and so we're getting some good results. So we can kind of go over some of those as well, of just kind of some of the interesting aspects, right? So like demographics wise, right? You kind of go, oh, okay, well, not surprisingly, Chrome users, right? Majority are Chrome, but that's universal, right? It's not that surprising there.
Mm-hmm.
But an interesting thing that we came across, because we've been connected with NVDA Access for NVDA as well. And so for NVDA, a lot of people assume because it works best. So that's a screen reader that works best or tested most in Firefox.
Okay.
And then JAWS is tested or works best in Chrome. Okay. Classically, it was IE, but they had to kind of shift when IE was kind of phasing out, right? And so there's this kind of conception that, oh, okay, well, that must be where the majority of the population goes.
Yeah.
And it kind of showed, no, still a majority of NVDA users are still on Chrome. Yeah. So that was still much higher. It wasn't that there was zero. It was just that it was still much higher. And actually, because we get a lot from online communities, a lot of tinkerers, there is also a much higher percentage of Firefox than what you're going to see on normal, or in a sense of like if you go to stat counters and globalized stat counters, I should say, rather than very specific ones. And so Firefox is, what was that, 25?
Yeah, it was a high number.
It was 25%.
Yeah.
Versus what you would often see in stat counters and online systems that are looking at global populations that are getting more of, like 5% or something along those lines. So it's a much drastic difference. But again, that's where everything has to be taken with a bit of a grain of salt because it's coming from online communities and especially Reddit online communities, which are going to have a slightly different audience. So the age group alone was mostly inside, again, as you might guess.
I was going to ask, what was that?
So the 20 to 35 and 35 to 50.
Yeah,
okay.
Like 55, actually.
Yeah.
So that range in there, which is not that surprising from the demographics that are usually on online communities like Reddit. And so
were there any people, in like 60s and 70s and stuff that were taking this?
But
there's respondents so far. And, and the same thing where it's like, okay, well, we had for less than 20. And so part of that too is that, well, not everyone's going to be willing, depending on their age demographic, to actually even really respond to these things because of their age. So we included it, but we didn't expect huge amounts. So there may still be larger amounts of younger audiences on those. that just may not be as active inside the survey spaces.
Yeah.
And then also because maybe also some parents are like, well, you're not old enough to be able to be on these communities yet.
Yeah.
Even though there have been multiple examples that Norb has come across where there's just, okay, hey, my son is, dealing with this and we're needing, community help. And that creates a communication flow so they don't feel so alone and separated.
Yeah.
But yeah, other things.
The one thing I do want to bring up in regards to the browsers.
Yeah.
The cross browsing is a real thing, and a lot of users use NVDA, use Chrome, and for a long time in the accessibility community, especially in articles and so forth, they always state, no, it's Firefox. It's only Firefox.
So that was kind of a big aspect. Then another thing too is, again, the interfaces, right? So the interfaces, how people are interacting. And there's another assumption that in the communities that it's like, okay, well, you must be keyboard based, right? So if you're a screen reader, you must be interacting with keyboards.
And that was one of the reasons, one of the big impact reasons for the survey was during one of the projects we were working on, there were use of what's called ARIA hidden, which is hiding information. And
like the interface itself, like and I don't know why they're doing it. It's not like it's from outside, right? So we assess even just outside clients, right? Not even our own. It's just like, okay, we're starting to see like a couple of patterns here, where in development we see developers, and I'm not sure the reasoning for it, where they'll say ARIA hidden on the text.
Visual.
So the visual text, right? So let's say you have a link and it says, go to the store, right? And it would be go to the store. And then you would say ARIA hidden on that text. So that should hide the text. And then the inker itself, they add a label through another method to say like, okay, the label for the accessible name is go somewhere else, which is a problem in itself, but all right. But what ends up happening is that in NVDA and a lot of these tools, they actually have a way of using a mouse to hover over text to announce it.
Right. Okay. Mm-hmm.
But it's not going to get that label because that's in a separate code aspect.
And it's ARIA hidden.
And it's ARIA hidden. And so the text itself is hidden. So they hover over it and nothing is announced. And I go, why are we adding it in the first place?
It just makes no sense to me.
It makes no sense. But there must be like, again, it's a pattern. So someone does it and then more people copy it. And then it becomes pervasive.
We need to figure out who started this.
Who started this?
Someone started it in a community and they kept going and it leaked out.
So there must have been some reasoning of like, oh, well, if we're adding these ARIA labels, ARIA is again just a syntax to be able to provide more information to screen reader users. But in this case, it's actually detracting. But they add this and it's just how screen readers work, where it's like, well, it's not going to access that information. It would access the visual because you're hovering over it.
Okay.
So maybe NVDA will do something and say like, okay, maybe we'll grab more from the accessibility information. But at the same time, it's just like, why are we doing that in the first place? Don't hide it. But it's because the assumption
kind of defeats the purpose.
It kind of defeats the purpose. But if you wouldn't know it if you were testing through and you're only testing with keyboard. If you're only testing with keyboard with a screen reader user, you wouldn't even recognize that you're actually blocking out a particular type of users.
What's another way besides a keyboard to test through this?
So mouse. Well,
there's mouse, but there's also there's different kinds of inputs, right? So there's switch inputs, eye trackers. There are again touch. So touch. Then there's actually gestures on like mobile devices that are a little bit different. There's Braille displays that actually have their own keys that kind of map to a degree to what keyboard users might use. So there's many different input types. And so that's where the assumption is always like, oh, they must be on a keyboard and they must be hitting these particular keys. And it's like, well, that's not the only way. And so that's where we found that, again, of the respondents so far, about 30% said they do use a mouse.
And that's people that have visual impairment. Not to the point of complete visual impairment, but they have enough there where they could zoom in or magnify and use a mouse. And if they can't read the text because it's still small, they're using NVDA and other tools to announce. And that user base in the surveys and previous surveys out there didn't exist because they didn't ask that specific question. Is there a mouse user using screen readers?
Yeah. And so that's why we were kind of doing this, is to show like there's many different ways that people interact with it to kind of break some of those we had hypothesis, right? We had okay, most likely we're seeing, and we have some anecdotal evidence. Why don't we see if the data then actually matches that? And so we are seeing some verification of those thoughts that we had. Where it's
Made
like,
me
okay,
happy.
and so again, we were also asking, kind of along the lines of just some of their experiences, right?
Yeah. What was the responses like for that?
So experiences got into, because we can ask experiences about everything and every UI and every single interface. It's like, all right, we have to find that balance. So we thought we'd pinpoint a couple of more topical ones that a lot of people have had conversations about more recently. And so one of them is about CAPTCHAs themselves, right? So pretty much many websites have some sort of Turing test type of security to stop the bots, right? They don't, but to try and stop the bots.
And that's like, click on every picture that's a car, or the crosswalk, or the traffic light. Okay.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yep. So it's many people think of reCAPTCHA, so the Google one where it's like, again, find those. There's ones where it's like drag to the perfect spot so the puzzle piece fits.
Oh, yeah.
Then you'll have ones
flip the image over so it's right in the right position.
Or you'll get ones where it's again type out what's this phrase, things like that. So you get all kinds. But the key thing is that I'm sure everyone listening and yourself included are perfect and have never messed up a single CAPTCHA in their lifetime.
Never. I'm extremely perfect.
Yeah, extremely perfect. So no, I have failed them plenty of times. So think of it this way, is that, the Turing test is to see if you're human, but humans will fail it. So is it really a good Turing test? Or is it really just you're making it as difficult as possible for everyone? And so that's really why we don't really suggest in general that you have CAPTCHAs, but it's a quote necessary evil, right? Because we have so much spam out there, right?
Yeah.
And so it gets into this dilemma of Google version 2 versus like Google reCAPTCHA version 3 has some differences, right? So version 3, you can actually even not use the out of the box Turing test, and you can say, hey, maybe there's something, let's say it's a member fill out, right? Maybe you could say, hey, I want you to fill out an email first. Like you would just say, like, respond to the email, right? So two-step verification, that can be a kind of a human task. So you see that too, as also sign-ins, right? The human aspect of like, okay, well, it's not just spamming it. It's okay, well, now do this separate task that can be done by users because you've got email. And you can go into your email because we would know that information. You can submit that and go through that process.
Right.
But yeah, so, CAPTCHAs, we were kind of curious. Okay, well, maybe if users are not really having problems, okay, well, then maybe, they've been figuring it out. All the different places have HCAPTCHA. All these ones have maybe figured out and made improvements, right? At the end of the day, though, there will always be a user that cannot fill these out. At the end of the day, there will always be a user. So a lot of times you go, oh, well, if for the image-based ones, they usually have an audio alternative. Okay, great. Audio alternative. What happens if you are both blind and deaf?
Now you're stuck.
Stuck. You actually literally have to get help in order to complete a simple task.
Or even hard of hearing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that are hard of hearing have some visual impairments. They can't do both. So they're stuck.
Yeah.
And so the same thing where it's, and again, it's gotten to the point, and I don't know if you've ever heard any of the audio based ones, but it's usually with a bunch of...
No, I have never.
Try and listen to it. It's like a bunch of white noise, very brief, short phrases.
And then you have to like type in the phrase that you heard.
And perfectly, and make sure it's exactly what was said, and you have to listen to it multiple times.
There's no way I could do that. I'm like,
and just think of it, and this is often all in English. So then this is just for native English speakers. What happens if you aren't a native English speaker that has to go through this and go through this exercise? Like, it's just not realistic for everyone to fill this out. So that's why we always suggest reduce that as much as possible. Make it so that you don't even need it, or not put it in front of people. But yes, our feedback was, okay, not surprisingly, but it was confirming it, right? So, most people were failing it at least a few times a week.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Then the next one was a few times a year, with around like 30% was a few times a year. Then the next one was a few times a month, right? So like majority was all within there. Surprisingly, there was like 4% or almost 5%.
The unicorns.
That I don't know how they did it, but they've never failed to CAPTCHA, I guess.
I failed last week, so I don't know how.
I don't know.
I would say I failed pretty recently too, like multiple times.
The traffic light, that gets me every time.
Yes. But so it kind of gets into where sometimes even questions, how pointed can you get, right?
Yeah.
And so what we assume is the people that said never is that they can eventually solve it, right?
Yeah.
Their concept of failure is maybe you don't pass the first 2-3 times, but you will eventually get in. Versus others' interpretation of what failure is like, I couldn't get past the first one. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, that's technically a failure, right? So sometimes we have to also take that in mind when we get those results.
Yeah.
The other area that we pointed out was, and had questions around, was overlays. And so accessibility overlays, most people, anyone that types in accessibility will usually get some ad for at least one of the overlay tools. And
is an overlay a tool?
Yeah.
Okay.
So an overlay is, and so terminology gets into all kinds of like, okay, who calls what, but it's fairly commonly referenced as overlay tools.
Okay.
Most people will think of it as like the blue matchstick icon or wheelchair icon in the top, like the bottom left or bottom right of your screen. That's usually like a button.
They call them the jumping jack.
And
because of some jumping
it's
jacks.
usually like the Da Vinci, your arms sticking out and things like that. And so those buttons, what they open up is a bunch of tools, right? Font size adjusters, then it might turn on
cognitive lines,
color contrast, some magnification tools, things like that. Now, a lot of them more recently have been also pushing, I'll put again quotes, AI to try and fix sites. So they're not just saying, here's some tools that you can use as an end user to maybe adjust the experience for your tastes or your needs. We're also going to try and fix the issues of the website itself. And so a lot of them have not done a great job because if I remember correctly, it was the overall experience of these overlay tools is about 72% say it's poor. Yeah. So the tool itself,
very overwhelming number.
Overwhelming numbers say it's not helpful.
Yeah.
Right. It's not a good experience. And then we even got feedback from users. We actually had it as an input option to say, what happened? Like, what are the problems? Right. And there's multiple people saying it crashes their assistive technology.
Which is a big deal. And you have to remember, that's how they use the computer.
Yeah.
So if it crashes their audio and they can no longer know what's the status of their machine, that's...
Yeah, because a lot of people assume like, oh, I'll put an overlay because, it has a screen reader tool built in. Yeah. Oh, okay, great. But how did a user open up Windows or a Mac or whatever, system they're on, open up a browser, go to a URL and type that all out and end up at their final destination for the website to finally give them a screen reader?
Yeah.
Oh, well, if they need a screen reader, they're going to need that the entire time.
So yeah, not just when they get to their destination.
When they're on the website, you know what? I'm going to turn it on because I now need it.
Yeah.
No, they're always going to be using it.
And so if it's actually crashing it to the point that they can't use it anymore, now they can't even use their operating system and they have to like completely restart their machines.
And there's double voicing. So the one thing with some of these tools is the other screen reader turns on and now they have, for example, JAWS or NVDA on. That's their primary.
Yeah.
And then some third party tool that's on that they can't turn off because they can't hear where they're going.
Because it's yelling at them at the same time, right?
Oh,
all
geez,
this.
Yeah.
So imagine all this is happening at the same time for an end user. It's scary. And other issues that it has that it causes is the page to actually slow down.
Yeah.
A lot of users were complaining one specifically that the page is very slow to use. Navigation is difficult. We'll give you an example. They get stuck on a page, certain section of the page, or the focus doesn't move as properly if they want to.
And so we've seen that as well. So we've actually seen it in the wild where as soon as you hit a key, like the navigation no longer works for even mouse users. And it's again, and I put it in quotes here, AI is, and you probably have seen it out there, isn't as smart as we would hope it to be, right? It's not there yet. And so that's where a lot of people, it's actually built into a lot of ad blockers that people use as extensions. They actually literally built in the blockers for these overlay tools.
Yeah.
So that's where it's out of the box, like it's already included. And so many people may not even realize that it's there because it's being blocked. So again, if the goal is to reach that target audience and make sure it improves it, so far, at least what the data is showing and some of the anecdotal that we're seeing is that it's not a great option.
Yeah.
And so that's why we always try and set expectations, right? There is no magic button out there. Hasn't been a magic button for anything ever. So there really needs to be that human involvement. And so if you think of it as a progressive enhancement, maybe some of the overlay tools, if you didn't have the automatic fixes and it's just, hey, if you needed to adjust color contrast, things like
focus line, for example,
focus line, magnification tools, things like that. Maybe some users might use it.
And there was positive feedback from some. That they use the magnification, for example. The focus line was the top, which is a little line that provides. So I'm a cognitive. I have cognitive issues. Sometimes my focus is out of place, and I use the line to actually show me when I'm reading and focusing.
Kind of hold the place. And,
exactly. And it's a great. So there is great tools and overlays.
So it's about, again, finding that balance again of maybe not so much on the automation aspect, but so much as maybe some of these tools that are a progressive enhancement for individuals that would like it. So the data then kind of says, like, okay, so we wanted to get that feedback from a couple of those different topics. Then, of course, we asked some similar ones that are in like WebAIM and others. And it's like, what do you think about, the experience of the web as a whole? And has there been significant changes? And pretty much everyone's like, no, because you get mixed, right? So those are a bit more half and half, and it's a bit more of like, not so like everyone says it's the worst thing ever. You get more of a mixture of different opinions. So overall, we've gotten some aspects that have really aligned with what we were thinking is going to happen. And then some good feedback overall of just ways to account for more user types.
And one of the user types is magnification. But something that a lot of the accessibility community especially wanted to know about was what type of magnification do users use? And one thing that stood out is users using Windows or operating system magnification and then using the browser magnification just enough so where they don't get the responsive mobile version of the page.
Okay.
But they still get the full desktop version of the page. But it's magnified.
So in a sense, users are used, and again, we're extrapolating some of this from just the data and also feedback that we've actually gotten from communities before. But users usually that do really need a fair amount of magnification are doing multiple layers. And so they're not just, don't think of just, they're just using browser magnification or they're just using their operating system magnification. And it is interesting where, they're a lot of the common percentages for how much they magnify, right? A lot of users are saying like 150%, not 200, not 300, not 400. They're saying 150% when they're using the browser magnification. And the reason why, as Norb was getting at, is that, because so much of the web is now responsive, you start to get to a certain breakpoint
and it triggers.
And now you get the quote mobile view, right? The smaller screen view. And so some prefer to have more of the non-small screen view. So they actually try and do a mixture in order to avoid that. That is not everyone, right? There's a fair amount of data showing, okay, there's just a variety of percentages. And so that's where the WCAG, right? The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, they try and aim for bare minimums, right? And so they can't account for all user types. So there is a lot of generalization saying, okay, you need to account for 200%, up to 200% for font size, and you need to account for 400% on certain screens to make sure that the reflows and get the responsive views. But it is interesting to get then, if you're trying to really test, because you can make a compliant website that's not as usable, and you can make a very usable website that's not as compliant. And so usually it's a bit of both, right? You could make something really usable that's fully incompliant, right? Like you really, it's not compliant, right? That's not possible, right? So there is a bit of a mixture there, but it is about okay, well, if you're trying to build the experience for end users and trying to make sure they have a great experience on your website and make sure they can access it, that's where knowing some of this more detailed information of like, okay, hey, well, it looks like a lot of people magnify to this percentage. Maybe we test a bit more here, even though that's not needed for, quote, compliance, right? It would be, well, let's account for the user's journey.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. So I feel like this whole thing we've kind of talked about, just a lot of great information that you guys have learned so far. What lessons have you learned through this? What have you learned to maybe do next time? What's going on in your guys' head from all of this information that we just talked about?
Number one lesson is there is server fatigue. That's
and we talked a little bit about that before, survey fatigue.
Because our completion rate, I haven't checked the most recent, it's about 50%.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's still, and that's also just for people that made it to the actual survey.
Yeah.
Then there's also a even huger drop off from people that actually saw that there was a survey
and just ignored it.
Just ignored it.
Yeah.
So, it is that, again, that's why we'll have further communication with WebAIM and other organizations to kind of go like, how do we reduce that, right? Does it make sense to do two separate ones? Maybe not. Maybe it's okay. Maybe just gather the information and how do you, group it together? How do you just now make it a one place?
Mm-hmm.
So there's more to figure out in the years to come. And then, of course, we talked about, like, again, type form, like there was limitations. Okay. We worked with them. They actually did some fixes. They did some adjustments on the fly
for us.
WebAIM was?
No, Typeform.
Oh, Typeform. Okay. And what's that again? Sorry.
It's just a survey tool. It's
okay.
Again, we're not promoting it, just more along the lines of where
it's what you guys
what we ended up happened to use this time.
Yeah.
But from doing that, we also found
a couple different survey tools that are trying to get into the accessibility space as well. So it's let's check those out. Let's see that in comparison, features, all those things to account for. But again, as site owners, that's just something to have, again, in your conversations, is seeing if they have feedback. If you're like, hey, I got accessibility concerns, and then it sits for 2 years and no one's done anything about it. It's like, those are red flags, right? Asking your vendors of saying, hey, what is your accessibility process? And, you may not need to be an expert to kind of know when a salesperson goes, yes, it's part of our practice.
Yeah. And you're like, oh, really?
Okay.
I didn't seem too confident on that response.
So there are ways of kind of accounting for that. And then again, even just feedback on questions themselves, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like, okay, maybe we weren't pointed enough in the question to get the results that we need. Or there's sometimes where it's like, okay, the amount of overlays, there's like...
The amount of overlays was low.
That was a lot of questions. Like you would have to, because we wanted not to create a bias and say like, okay, well, because some people even filled out, I don't know the name. Like what's the name of the
right, okay.
I included, a lot of
so, like 30 some options of like, okay, because there's that many overlay tools out there.
I would have thought maybe 7 to 10.
No. But there's just so many. So if we just say like these 7 to 10, and it's like,
and you have
they have to then go like, well, I don't even know the name of it.
Yeah.
And things like that. So
there's white labels too.
And there's white labels. So a lot of ones are also selling it to then have a different name, but it's literally the same tool.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, okay, then how do we group that all together? So could be, we reduce it down, but we also needed to see how much responded in the first round to say like people actually recognizing the names.
Yeah.
And then going, okay, from then subsequent rounds, maybe we consolidate that down and then the rest fall under other in a sense.
Yeah. So out of all of this, is there anything that was particularly interesting or like surprised you guys? Or can you think of one thing, like off the top of your head that you're like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that? Or
so the overlays did have a couple surprises for the people that were at the conference.
Because when we presented at the CSUN has a yearly accessibility conference, and so that's where we presented some of our initial findings.
Oh, awesome. Okay. And
there some of the responses from the users to actual end users experience with some overlays was pretty interesting. The other one was, again, mouse users. There is mouse users. That also got the room.
Like the responses. Like again, because like we're saying, it is fairly deeply embedded of like, okay, it's got to be keyboard. It's got to be these things.
Keyboard only.
So
and you guys said it was what, 30? Around 30?
Around 25 to 30% was mouse users.
And so there is some surprises there. I think part of it too is just a lot of the positive reaction from the community as well. I think, it's always that bit of hesitance of like, okay, well, we're just adding yet another thing for you to do. And we're, some users might, again, if you have to take a long time in order to accomplish a task, is it a bit draining? And we even have some, hey, is this survey okay or not? And we do have ones where they're like, this is the worst thing ever. Yeah. Right. And it's
there's always going to be.
And there's always been, you're like, oh.
The trolls.
But, we need to take that in and kind of go like, okay, well, what was it about that experience and how can we improve that? So it is even kind of going like, okay, we've got to learn from some of these items as well. And we'll try and improve it for subsequent rounds.
You're excited because this is just it helps not just us to understand, but also the community and as a whole.
Yeah, no, so this is fantastic, and it was really cool to learn about all of this. So, what happens next, though? What are your guys' next moves in regards to this? You're going to keep the survey open for probably a little over 3 months.
Yeah, 3 more months or so. And then pretty much we see how much the data has changed, right? I mean, because it's still early on. Maybe once you get to 1,000, maybe it will show, okay, no, JAWS is still the number one most used. I guess that was something. NVDA was the most widely used. And in WebAIM surveys, there's always been, over time, a kind of back and forth between JAWS and NVDA as being the number one biggest use for primary screen readers.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And this one is like a drastic difference, almost like 2 times difference between with the amount of NVDA users compared to JAWS users.
And it could be the user base
again. So Fable did a presentation at CSUN as well, and so they were kind of seeing from their own analysis of different surveys and whatnot that again they were kind of hinting at that NVDA users tend to be tinkerers. So again, so then maybe there is a lot of alignment where it's like, okay, your online communities tend to be tinkerers, the NVDA users tend to be tinkerers. So then, then that kind of aligns on where you might see a larger percentage in those online populations compared to JAWS users that may be from more formal, like medical practice and other ways of maybe users that are not as much online might be using other screen readers. So again, we always have to take it with a grain of salt, but it is really surprising just how drastic of a difference it was.
That was great news, especially for NVXs that was in the room.
Yeah, they were actually there, and they were just like, oh, wow, okay, great.
They were surprised too.
Yeah, they were surprised too.
So I have one last question for you guys, and I feel like this is going to be a little hard to answer because you said a lot of awesome stuff on this episode, but speaking of the survey and everything that you've learned so far, what is one main message you want listeners to take away from this?
I think it's, again, to realize there's just step outside of your own shoes, right? And it's human nature, right? And as accessibility specialists, that's what we have to do every day. We can't assume and just be like, that's the way it is. We have to go, okay, like we even for our own interpretations and say like, okay, well, this must be absolutely a problem, or maybe this is not an issue for end users. And we go, no, let's rethink this through again. And let's not just assume it's always going to hold true. And you go like, oh no, and again, the mouse or these other types of input devices, you're like, oh, we're not thinking of them enough, right? Mm-hmm. So as you start to build your foundation on your website and you're like, we've done everything right and we've done a lot of work, great. Let's now account for there's a lot more other user types that aren't probably being considered, and we have to step outside those. So, if you're just getting into it, crawl into it and start focusing on more of those traditional, keyboard users or keyboard screen reader users, things like that. But you kind of go, oh, well, now let's go dive a little bit deeper and actually account for end users. And then if you are getting feedback from end users, right, and that's great. So if you have surveys of your own, or if you have your own way of like, hey, can you give us feedback if you're having problems? Understand that at the end of the day, still everyone's an individual. Yeah. So there are going to be some preferences on some that don't match others. Mm-hmm. So, you try and account for as much as possible and just step out of your own shoes.
And just from my community itself, every advancement that's made is made from data.
Yeah, absolutely.
From this, I learned that the information is going to help someone, no matter if it's this year, next year, and 5 years. That data is going to help. So I'm really happy why we did this. And also, this was one comment I made a long time ago to Nick and everybody else that's in the design web development community, is if you're happy with your work and you have NVDA installed on your machine, turn off your monitor and go at it.
Yeah.
Go through your site. See how many pages you get through.
Yeah.
And if you can't get through the first homepage, then you need to think more about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's again, and that's where, many companies, organizations, they spend a lot of money on A/B testing. They spend a lot of money on SEO improvements and monthly efforts. And it's like, do just the same in accessibility and you'll end up with better user interfaces and for everyone.
And people have to remember the visual impairment is not fully completely blind. It's all types of users.
Yeah.
And everybody goes through vision impairment through their lifetime.
Absolutely.
And people that are over 60, especially.
Yeah, their experience is going to be different than someone who's been, blind their entire lives.
Yeah.
And so that's where it's just, again, once you start thinking about it, that's where I kind of see it's like, it's not that everyone's malicious or anything when you're developing and whatnot. It's just,
they don't know.
You don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know. And so it's just starting to get that feedback, starting to look through it. And so hopefully survey results will help with that too.
Survey results, conversations like these. This was awesome, you guys. Thank you so much. And what you're doing is incredible. And I'm excited to know more about this as, time goes on. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Modern Marketing Messages. And if you missed part 1, the link is in the description of this episode. For more information about the topics discussed today, check out the description of this episode. If you like this episode, follow the podcast wherever you listen to them to stay up to date with us. While you're at it, give us a rating and share this podcast with others. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Modern Marketing Messages. This episode is brought to you by AmericanEagle.com Studios. I'm Taylor Karg, and I'll be back with another Modern Marketing Message.